I lied again. We're not going to be talking about the week and how we put that into the block. Instead, we're going to be talking about the important pieces of each different style of block because I don't think I covered that well enough, and I think you all need some more detail before I really just generalize some more. So, if we look, we have hypertrophy, strength, and peaking, as we have gone over many times before. But what are the exact variables that we alter, and what are the exact criteria of each block? Well, here are some outlining ideas. So, first off, for hypertrophy, I want you to understand what volume is. I throw volume around a lot, and you might not really know what exactly the term means. So volume is just your sets, your reps, and your weight for that exercise. So for squats, that's, I'm going to bring up my calculator real quick because I cannot do this off the top of my head. But let's say I'm squatting 315 for 8 reps for 3 sets. So that's 7,560 pounds of volume, right? That is the volume for that exercise. And then of course I take that for the other exercises, and that's the volume I have for the day for, let's say, my quads. And then from that I can put that into my weekly volume, and that's the amount of overall weekly volume that I have. You can do this for each exercises or for each muscle group and use that to analyze the overall amount of volume that you're getting in. Volume is the main driver of hypertrophy. There's a lot of research coming out that's saying that the whole sets and reps scheme isn't the main decider. It's the idea of how much overall volume are you doing per week. As far as how many pounds, I don't really know, I'll be honest. But it's just, and the research out there as well, it's not clear cut, and nothing is clear cut, and I don't think it will be for a long time. It's just a matter of understanding that more volume is better for growing more muscle. So, if we look at this, upping your volume obviously is going to be better for hypertrophy. Just as a guideline, don't think you have to calculate how much volume that you're doing every single week. You can if you want, if you're a control freak, but just understanding your sets, how many sets you're doing per week, how many reps you're doing per week for each muscle group, that's a good place to start. And as we look at that, volume work for hypertrophy is around 8 to 14 reps. You can do more, and as you do more, that's getting into the more endurance side of it. But again, guidelines, you're still going to get a lot of hypertrophy out of doing sets of 16. Okay, don't think that doing 16 reps is going to make you suddenly a marathon runner. That's not the case at all. 8 to 14 reps and 2 to 4 sets. You can do more. I've done 5 by 8, which suck, but you can get it done if you want. But that's just a good guideline, is 2 to 4 sets. If you err on the side of 2 sets, that's going to be the opposite for the higher end of rep schemes. You don't want to do 2 sets of 8, because usually that's not enough volume in to get the required reaction you want. The lower the reps, the higher the sets, is kind of the inverse relationship of that. You also want higher variation. So if you're a power lifter or a specific strength athlete, or you just want to get better at a few things, you're a football player, maybe you want to have a better squat, better hang clean, maybe a better bench. Okay? In your off season, or the time that you're not focusing on strength as much, maybe that is in season, when you're really just focusing on size, I'll just talk about powerlifting because that's what I know the best. So if you're not around the meet and you really just want to build some size that works into your goals right now, you want to have more variation. So that means doing less of the actual back squat, deadlift, and bench. It means doing maybe more front squatting, maybe some leg pressing, maybe some other types of variation, some band squats, that kind of stuff. And even more variation is putting more work into assistance exercises. So that's focusing a lot less on your back squat or your bench throughout your workout. On something like a peaking style block, which we'll get to later, that's going to take up at least half of your workout, probably more, maybe 2/3. But in something like hypertrophy, it'll be around 1/3 of your workout, because you're going to want to focus a lot of time on a lot of different exercises so you can hit the muscle group from a lot of different areas, and really so you can focus on weak points. It's another big area is you want to really nail down your weak points and build the muscles up that are lagging behind. And like I said, around 20 sets a week is kind of the top end, but I found that's a good middle ground for me for the amount of volume that you need. This is not of reps or sets of 3. This is your hypertrophy sets, so 8 to 14 per muscle group per week. And this does change a little bit with the different muscle groups, but it's a good general goal overall. If you want a bit more detail on this, Dr. Mike Israetel, he's made a ton of great videos about how many muscle groups or how many sets per muscle group you need per week. So let's move on to strength. Strength, that's going to be in between hypertrophy and peaking, as we've talked about. Strength, you raise your intensity, dial in specificity, and lower your volume. So intensity, you're going to be doing heavier weight. Obviously, you're trying to get stronger, so you're going to do heavier weight. Not very hard or difficult to understand. And with strength, the idea of it is you're also putting more intensity into your lifts. As you lift, you can start to get more psyched up and start to get yourself a bit more ready to attack the lift, because you don't need as much endurance throughout your entire workout that day. So that's also something to think about. So the actual intensity of how you approach it. Next, you have you dial in some specificity. This is when your workout should start to be around, really start to focus around your main lifts of the day. So that's going to be around 50% of your time towards your main lift. Again, these are all guidelines. They change per person, and whatever works best for you over time that you've experimented with. Once you find that out, then you can go off of that. But I found that 50% is around a good time frame. And the reason, I think we didn't really talk about this, is the reason why you want to dedicate so much time to these main lifts, that these main compound lifts, non-isolation lifts, you can get really heavy on them. There's a lot of opportunity for overload and progressive overload that you can't really leverage with isolation movements or even with some lighter compound movements. So you're able to get a lot stronger overall because of that. And if that's the exercise that you compete in, then you definitely want to get better at it and dedicate more time to it just to learn the skill. So then we have lower volume. So 5 to 8 reps, again a guideline, but it's pretty proven. 5 to 8 reps of 3 to 5 sets. I think that works best for most people. You get the typical 5x5 or the 3x8. That's a good solid strength base. And you're still going to build a lot of size, don't get me wrong. You're not just going to be stronger. But it's a good crossover, and it's the best rep range and set range to build that strength. So now we'll go on to peaking. Peaking is it's a lot more complex and it's difficult. And it's not something that I really want to tackle entirely in this video. That's many other separate videos. And there's a bunch of great videos out there too if you want to see some other content. Juggernaut is probably the best source, I'd say, of information out there. Scientifically backed. It's very good. So very specific, like I said, that's around 2/3 of your time towards that exercise. So a lot less assistance work. And keep in mind, the more experienced you are, the less assistance work you need, because you have more general training in these other areas as you get more advanced. So when you're a newbie, you don't have as much of that general training, and you need more other exercises to really dial that in. And that was something that's repeated quite a bit. And when I went to a seminar recently with I don't want to murder his name, Andrei Milinichev. I think it's Andre, and Andrey, Andre, something like that. Sorry, man. Milinichev, super nice guy. That was a big point that he really wanted to drive home, is that as you progressed in your workouts over periods of time, he got more specific. And heck, he went in the gym most of the time and just squatted and left. Why? Is because he built up, like I said, that general strength, and he just needed to really dial in and destroy on those squats. He didn't need to build up the muscles as much. He was already huge. He was like 300 pounds, but he needed to get stronger And that's something we'll look into later, why you dedicate more time to peaking as you become more experienced. And then you also have very low volume. So that's going to look around the 1 to 4 rep range and the 3 to 10 set range. So I know what you're thinking, 10 sets? Are you kidding me? Be cautious with that. Don't jump into 3 reps for 10 sets. That's insane. Only do that if you have a really high work capacity and you're doing low weight. Most people would not recommend for that. But it's the higher end, and if you're doing really low or a little bit lower work, then you can get away with it. But I'd say stick around the 3 to 6 set range is usually good for most people. 3 by 3 is like a solid peaking template, I guess, that you can work with, and you can alter from there if you want. And the percentage, I didn't put that in the other ones because it wasn't as relevant, because it'd just be all over the board. But when you get to peaking, you're going to work in the high 80s, low 90s. Peaking is going to be so intense that you got to be careful. So this is the difficulty with peaking, is you can easily overwork yourself, and you can also underwork yourself because it's such a fragile thing to manipulate. So it's something that we really need to expand in a different video, but just understand the basic tenets behind it. All right, move over a little bit. Now we're going to look at some neat graphs I drew up. Okay, just keep in mind the black line is volume and the dotted line is intensity. So this is a graph for a newer trainer, so something like someone that's been training for maybe a year or so. You don't really need to consider these if you have been training for less than a year. So at least a year. And this is someone that's been training for a few years, maybe even 5 years. All this is showing how over time we decrease volume and we raise intensity. All right, same thing with here. The only difference between the two is where they cross over. The advanced, they cross over a lot sooner. This is the hypertrophy, strength, and the peaking blocks. Right? So that's just showing what we've talked about in here, that you start with a higher volume and you lower it over time and you raise your intensity. Okay? Just in a neater, nicer looking form. So in the newer graph here for the newbie, we start out with a higher volume and it kind of suddenly drops in the strength phase. And it meets the intensity, which starts to skyrocket up around the same time. And the reason they meet so far over as compared to one here is because the newer trainee, they need a lot less time to peak and more time to build muscle. If you've been training for less time, obviously you're a lot weaker and you're a lot smaller than someone that's more advanced. But for the purpose of powerlifting, and that's what we're talking about here, powerlifting and like really hardcore strength training for peaking, is that you need a lot less muscle as an advanced trainer than you do strength. You need the minimum amount of muscle that you can to be able to train those muscles to perform the movement for the exact strength that you want. If you hold on too much muscle for your frame, you're going to be up weight classes. And that can be, there's nothing wrong with having too much muscle, but if you want to stay in a certain weight class and you want to stay competitive, you don't really want to have too much muscle. So you want enough muscle mass in order to hit the types of PRs and type of weights that you want. But the newer trainee, they don't even have that concern because they hardly have any muscle at all. Even someone that's been training for a few years, I look very small in these videos because I'm wearing baggy t-shirts and all that, and I've been training. But someone like me, I've been training a year or two, or like 3 years. I have a decent amount of muscle mass on me already. But I definitely need a lot more in order to hit the kind of numbers that I want to hit. So right now, I'm capable, if I focus purely on strength and purely on peaking, a lot less than someone with just 10 more pounds of muscle. And plus, I want to get heavier anyways. So it's in the best favor, it's with your benefit in mind that you should gain muscle mass early on and even later on. But earlier on, you need more time to gain it, right? So we spend this entire hypertrophy block with a lot of volume. And you can see here the advanced person tapers out their volume and starts raising their intensity. And then for the strength block, it's a deep dive. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything against the strength block. It's just a bit more aggressive in terms of switching it over to peaking. But as you can see the difference here, it's still a lot higher volume and a little bit lower intensity than the advanced trainee is. My computer just turned off here or something. All right, we're still good. That was really weird. Don't know what happened there. That was strange. Lost my train of thought. But since they meet further along by the peaking block, the newer trainee has less time to peak. And that's fine because more peaking time isn't going to hurt you, but if you need to make the trade-off, you should make the trade-off in favor of extra hypertrophy. Now, for the more advanced person, they don't need to build muscle size as much, and they don't need to build that general strength as much. I mean, they still do, but not as much as they need to peak properly, so that you give them more time to peak. So you can see there. Again, all guidelines. If something works better for you, do it that way instead. But this is a good template for most people. And as you experiment with yourself, you'll learn more. But right now, just consider more volume if you're a new trainee, more volume, less time to peak, more general training. Okay. And the next video, I think we'll finally get on to how to insert those weeks into the blocks. And with that, what do you do from there? How do we apply all these things that we've learned in actually constructing some solid blocks and with that, a nice program that we can actually make. And then maybe I'll make something for you guys. So tune to the next one. Thanks for watching.